Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Darren St. George, and welcome to our virtual road trip to the Rosemary Clooney Museum. This is an exciting day. Hello. Today we have Heather French Henry from the Rosemary Clooney Museum. She is our curator, and she is also with us here with her daughter Harper. Harper is manning the camera, and we're so pleased to have them both. There's Harper. This really is wonderful. We are now in November. It's the start of the holiday season, and I cannot imagine a better way to begin. So let's get a few housekeeping tips out of the way. Please make sure that you have your microphones muted and that you have your cameras off as well. We want to make sure that we can hear Heather and Sal. And speaking of Sal, our master of ceremonies, Dad, you want to hop on board? There we go. Check that camera, make sure that's up and running, and that'll snap on in a second. But everyone, we are so pleased to have you with us. We'll be doing polls as always. You'll see them popping on from time to time. Cast your vote. Let us know what you think. If you're over on Facebook and you have any questions, we want to hear them. Type them into the chat and we'll share them with Sal and Heather. I've said enough. Let's get on with the show. You two have fun. Sal, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. An early Merry Christmas to everyone. And we could not be more overjoyed to have Heather with us today from the Rosemary Clooney Museum. It's actually, it's the Rosemary Clooney House. Tell us a little bit about the house, Heather.
Well, first off, I just want to say good morning to everyone who is on board with us this morning. And Sal, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity for us to showcase the Rosemary Clooney House. The Rosemary Clooney House is nestled in the Ohio Valley in a little town called Agusta, Kentucky. Augusta is one of the top 10 places to see before you die, as noted by Thomas Clark, one of the Kentucky historians. So if you're coming down to Kentucky, make your way to the Ohio Valley near Cincinnati, just a little bit downriver, and we are right here, town of 1,400 people. My great-great-grandfather back in 1796 founded Augusta, Captain Philip Butner, and it even has a ferry boat that still runs, the Jenny Ann. It runs across the Ohio River.
Heather, do you mind if I tell them a little bit about you?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
For those that you may recognize her. If you are a fan, well, let me just put the slide up for you. Here she is in the year 2000. I don't know if you can see it, Heather, but we have your winning the Miss America competition. What is the official, how do they officially say it? It's not a contest.
Now it's called the Miss America competition, but for us in the old days, it's still the Miss America pageant. We will be celebrating our 100th anniversary next year. In fact, Margaret Gorman was the first crowned on September 8th, 1921. So we are headed into that next year, and we'll be so excited. And I'm going to show you a little surprise at the end of our tour for those who stay on board with us on the viewership today.
So for those that are looking right now, that's Heather winning the yes.
Yeah, check your screen share on that. That's just not coming through right now. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep. It's probably up on there you go.
Okay. Now you can see it, everybody.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Now compare and contrast. It's been 20 years. It's okay.
Heather, I just wish you were happier about it.
Yeah. It was an amazing opportunity, and I will tell you one of the great stories and why we got involved with the Rosemary Clooney House. Really, Rosemary and I were born and raised in the same area. She was born in Maysville, Kentucky, and then later purchased this home in Augusta in 1980. I was born and raised in Augusta, and then later moved to Maysville to finish up high school with Mason County as a Mason County Royal, no less. But Rosemary was the second phone call I received after winning Miss America, and I'll share a little bit more about that with you at the end of the tour.
I'm showing also some of the pictures that you forwarded to me, you with Lee Merriweather.
Yes. Now, as many of you all know who love celebrities from yesteryear, Lee Merriweather, Miss America 1955. It's a very tight Miss America sorority we have. And she went on to become the original Catwoman in the movie, and then actually went on to star in lots of TV shows, Barnaby Jones being one of her more famous. And then, of course, she did several episodes of Star Trek. And then our 100th anniversary Miss America exhibit, which will start off at the holidays here at the museum, we'll be showcasing her Star Trek costume as well.
Okay. The next slide I have is your family and your husband. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your husband?
Yes, Dr. Steve Henry. He is a trauma orthopedic surgeon and former lieutenant governor here, served an 8-year term, the only in Kentucky's history to serve a 2-year, 8-year term here in Kentucky. And he is very passionate about preserving Americana history. So when we were asked to purchase Rosemary's home by her daughter, Monsita, Stephen became very passionate about this cause. Of course, we really didn't anticipate that it was going to become a 100% museum, but you know what, today, we work hand in hand on making sure we're collecting as many valuable articles as possible to be able to put in the museum and to preserve that musical cinematic history that you're going to see today.
I have up on the screen, I know you can't see it right now, but there's some guy, I guess his name is George Clooney.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit about George, right?
Yeah, and also Nick is there and Rosemary. And it looks like there was a celebration you were having, a dedication of some sort.
Yes, in fact, George has been here for several of our dedications. We grew up with George here in town. He actually worked on the Jenny Ann, the ferry that I mentioned before. He graduated from Agusta High School, and he, Amal, and the kids have been back home several times again. It's a very small town, so we all have known each other for quite some time. He's been a great contributor to the museum, has donated quite a few outfits. And when we start off the tour, I'm going to show you one special costume of his, which he actually premiered that movie back home in Maysville in honor of Rosemary. So George has been here. Nick is constantly helping us with the museum. He and Nina, his wife, still live here in Agusta, and Nina actually still runs a store called Nina's. When I was little, she had a general store, and she used to sell penny candies. So I used to use all of my allowance every 2 weeks to buy penny candies from Nina Clooney.
Let's start the tour.
All right. Well, I just want to welcome everyone inside the Rosemary Clooney House. We are actually standing in what was her dining room. Now, this house is pretty famous here in Agusta, even before it was Rosemary's. It was built around 1830 as the old Bradford Hotel. And so when we walk through the house, you'll see that there is a little bit of an addition on the back, but not the original addition, which housed all of the bedrooms. So where I'm standing right now in the dining room, you'll see behind me this large case. Now, what's important about this is an original article from when Rosemary had the house. When she bought the house in 1980, there actually was a sign on the house that said uninhabitable or not fit for human habitation. In fact, most of Riverside Drive in Agusta in the 70s had become pretty dilapidated. And it wasn't until the TV saga, some of you might remember, called Centennial, starring Robert Conrad and Richard Chamberlain, came into town to film right here in Agusta on the riverbank, and they transformed the riverbank into downtown St. Louis. And so what was important was that the movie company started renovating some of these buildings for the film, and a lot of people from out of town saw the possibilities of what these houses could be and how they could be restored. And that really caused a resurgence in the restoration of Riverside Drive. And if you've been to Agusta, you'll know that we are famous for our Riverside Drive, because back in 1937, when the big flood came through, we were too poor to put up a flood wall. But that means that all the days it doesn't flood here in Agusta, we get the most amazing sunsets, which is really why Rosemary loved this house. And so in 1980, when she purchased it, Nina and Nick actually helped her to renovate the house, and they pulled in a lot of antique pieces from Cincinnati, but also from Maysville, Kentucky. This big, huge case was actually from Murphy's Jewelers in Maysville, Kentucky. And when we bought the house, Nina said that piece had to stay because I think, one, she just didn't want to move it, which I certainly can appreciate. But it actually houses a couple of really important pieces that we had early on in our collection. We actually have one of our first pieces from The Stars Are Singing, which I'll talk about in just a moment. That was Rosemary's first movie that she actually premiered in Maysville, and that's going to be important in just a moment. Behind that is actually her fur coat. She came in when she premiered that movie. She dedicated the Rosemary Clooney Street, and she also was in a huge parade, which is really interesting because after Miss America, I too had a homecoming, and Maysville did a huge parade for me in Maysville. So I was very fortunate to follow in those footsteps of Rosemary.
Excuse me for 1 second, Heather. Could Harper move in on some of those items so we can get a close-up?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, let's get in on it.
Yeah, this is The Stars Are Singing blouse, and you can see the unfinished edge. In fact, Edith had did this, the collection in this movie. Edith had, of course, arguably the most noted costume designer in Hollywood history. She only did a few pieces per actor or actress. It was a low costume budget film. But I show this so people can see sort of the unfinished business of Hollywood costuming. And then over here, of course, you can see her fur coat, which she later actually gave to Gail Darley, or Gail Stone. That was her maiden name, which was Rosemary's half-sister, and Gail gave that back to the museum. Now, behind me is actually one of George's pieces from Leatherheads. Now, Leatherheads was an important movie, largely unknown movie for George, although we have some of his items from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Monuments Men, Ides of March, Up in the Air, quite a few pieces he's given us. But Leatherheads was important because he wanted to honor Rosemary and her history. So he premiered that movie actually back in Maysville, just as she had done with Stars Are Singing. Of course, she premiered her movie, the Old Russell Theater, which is no longer running as a theater. So he actually premiered it at the old Washington Opera House, which incidentally is where I got my start doing musical theater. So George has been very beneficial to the museum in being able to dedicate some of these items to us. And he actually came to town. We did the whole red carpet piece. And at the end of the premiere, he donated this and some of the marketing materials to the museum. So it's pretty special for us today. So we're going to pan around here and show you just a little bit of what we've got in this front room. This is where people come in and we sort of introduce Rosemary's life and her legacy here. We also have lots of items. I know several of your guests had already asked about gift items that they could get to help sustain the museum. We have T-shirts, we have books. We actually have wonderful little ornaments that we've made that replicate some of the most famous costumes from White Christmas. You can actually get those online at several different stores. There's a link on the RosemaryClooney.org website, or you can also go to rosehillapparel.com or find us on Facebook. We also have one of her more famous autobiographies. It's not in print, so we do try to find as many gently used books as possible. This is really one of the best known books about Rosemary's life and career. And one of the things I do want to reiterate to people, you know, Rosemary did have her ups and downs in life. We all go through our own vicissitudes, right, of the roller coaster of life. But Rosemary was really a funny, witty, wonderfully talented human being. And when I had the pleasure of being around her for the few years I got to really be close with her, she shared with me some really fun stories of her day. So she ended her life certainly on a high note. But all of these items are available if you'd like to help support the museum. Now, you'll see in some of our collection as well, these big cases, and they will house albums, sheet music, things that people usually find in their grandmother's attic. So we have a growing archive of donated items, which is really beneficial for the museum, because in a couple of weeks, when we actually loan out our White Christmas exhibit to another museum, which is going to the Upcountry Museum at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, we like to be able to also showcase some of those items, like the albums or the newspapers or the sheet music as well that goes along with the costumes. So when you find those at flea markets or in your grandmother's attic, don't throw those away. We'll take those items in our archives.
Okay, Heather, on the screen right now, I know you can't see it. I have posters from, she only made 4 major movies. She did Stars Are Singing, Here Come the Girls with Bob Hope, and Red Garters. And
That's right, White Christmas. She did do a smaller film with MGM called Deep in My Heart.
Right.
But it was much more like a cameo, certainly, role. But those 4 films were 4 of her major motion pictures. Of course, White Christmas being the most known, certainly for she and also for Danny Kaye.
Yes, absolutely. Do you want to start on White Christmas?
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take you through to our movie room. It actually has 3 of the non-White Christmas movie collections, which is very important because, again, we showcase her career before she got to White Christmas, and it also showcases even more of Edith Head's collections. And so what we have is we will be showing you The Stars Are Singing, which she co-starred with Anna Maria Alberghetti. Anna Maria actually celebrated her 16th birthday during this movie, right on the movie set. So again, this was Rosemary's first movie, of which she actually dedicated and premiered in Maysville, Kentucky at the Old Russell Theater. We also have over here Red Garters. Now, Red Garters is important because Edith had also did this collection. Rosemary, this is one of her more unappreciated films. It actually is available for download and streaming on Amazon Prime right now, and it's one of the few that's actually available on DVD, as is, of course, White Christmas. But Here Come the Girls, which we'll see in a moment, is not available. It's only available on VHS. I wish they pulled that one out on DVD. But Red Garters, Rosemary plays Calaveras Kate, a saloon owner. And what's interesting about this particular musical is, one, it is a comedy satire about Western musicals. So when you watch it, it's almost as if they filmed a Broadway musical. The entire stage is yellow. It's very sparsely decorated, very minimalistic. When they highlight the saloon, it's basically white matchsticks almost as it's built. But the movie actually showcases three things: the dancing, the singing, and the costumes. The costumes are divine. Of course, being designed by Edith Head, they're pretty glorious. Now, a lot of the chorus girl costumes, the chorus girls stay in one or two costumes throughout the entire film because the cast is largely on stage the entire time. Now, Rosemary Clooney, we've got 5 pieces in our collection, 2 of which we've got highlighted today. This piece over here is Rosemary's 2-piece candy stripe red chintz cotton dress.
Harper, can you move in on that a little bit, Harper? Thank you.
This particular piece being chintz cotton, that chintz, that chemical finish allows that costume to be so well preserved, unlike one of her silk plaid dresses that we have, which is in restoration. It's in much poorer condition, but this piece is very heavy. It's 2-piece, and actually when she wears it in the movie, she takes the coat off in a scene and has a bustier underneath, which we actually don't have in our collection. We also have a blue dress from Pat Crowley, who was a young up-and-coming actress. That costume had been used for another movie, so that is in restoration as well. And then we also have Guy Mitchell, a pair of his breeches, which we are restoring too. And that brings me into the conversation about conservation, preservation versus restoration. So when we work with other museums, and I do a lot of military educational exhibits as well for entities, and a lot of the historically accurate and real not costumes, but clothing memorabilia, we try to preserve as they are when we get them. For the movie memorabilia, one of the things we find for our customers and people coming to the museum, they love to see things restored as they were in the movies that they were best known for. And so what we find is there's usually not a lot of restoration work done, but in White Christmas, I'll show you one of the more magnificent pieces that took a 2-year process and an official costume designer to be able to help us to restore. So 3 of the 5 pieces for Red Garters are going under restoration currently, and we're hoping by next year those will be out on view as well. But I would encourage everyone to look up Red Garters. I think you're going to really enjoy the movie. A really fun factoid: Rosemary's second husband, Dante DePaulo, actually was a dancer in this film, so you'll see him dancing in the background.
Heather,
Yes.
I know our guests, and one of the questions they're going to ask is, how tall was she?
Oh, Rosemary? Oh,
Yeah.
gosh. You know what? I will have to check that, but I would officially think that she was around 5'4", 5'5". She and I did not differ a whole lot in height, as I remember, but of course, that was in her older years. A really fun fact to note is that her waist was 23 inches when she was making these films. I think a lot of times when people watch White Christmas, she looks a little more robust, but that's because she's standing beside Vera Ellen, who had a waist of 18 inches.
Yeah.
So that's like the size of my thigh. So Rosemary was very petite and small throughout her early career. And a lot of people know her as she gained a little weight when she got a little older.
Harper, can we move in and see the other costume, the Red Garter costume?
So
There
this
we
is
go.
a chorus girl costume, and this chorus girl actually takes the coat off from time to time, but she's in this costume the entire film. And this one is a taffeta with velvet and tassels, beautifully preserved, so well constructed. Again, as noted, for being Edith Head's wonderful designs and construction.
When you think of the vast amount of films that Edith Head was involved with, to come up with something original, creative, different for each movie, amazing. An amazing career.
Phenomenal. And as a fashion designer myself, she's a person that I studied, and her creativity, her ingenuity, resourcefulness was pretty amazing. We've got some great stories about costuming in White Christmas and fitting several of the actors and actresses, which I think is really neat.
Heather, do you know if there's an Edith Head museum or exhibit of any sort?
Well, I know that Columbus, Ohio, they had a huge Edith Head exhibit at one time. We do know that there are large collections by several collectors that exist, and I'm not exactly sure if they're housed in any one place or they're just rotating exhibits. I've seen them on rotation more than I've seen them in just one setting.
Amazing. Okay, take it away.
So this room that we're actually standing in, when Rosemary lived here, this room actually was 3 different rooms. We had Rosemary's kitchen, which we still utilize today for our volunteers who help run the museum. Where my daughter is actually standing, that was a powder/dressing room where Dante Apollo used to get ready when he lived here with Rosemary. And where I'm standing was a room called the B&B room, the Books and Booze room. Rosemary loved to entertain here in her Agusta home. She had, of course, the red carpet, which we've maintained throughout the house. She and I both love living in hotels, and I think a lot of hotels that she was in her heyday had red carpet, and she loved walking on the red carpet. So we kept that. She also had a red velvet couch, and she had a bar and a fireplace in it. Unfortunately, right after we purchased the home, this particular floor had to totally be redone because of the devastation from the 1997 flood. If you look back through flood history in the Ohio Valley, we flood about once every 30 years. And in 1997, it almost wiped out several small towns. It actually got up to 61 feet, which actually was above our wainscoting or our chair rail area on the first floor. So we get very concerned when we get heavy rains, and this entire room, we decided to open up to create a larger space for the non-White Christmas collection. So as I'm standing in it now, it's much more open than when she had it. But where I am standing next to are some of the original seats from the old Russell Theater, which I mentioned from The Stars Are Singing. That's where she premiered The Stars Are Singing. And I actually, when I was little, it was still open, and I saw Star Wars sitting in those very seats. So a lot of great history. And on those chairs, you'll see several continuity photos from Paramount and some of the inside pictures of her home in Beverly Hills. Now, that brings me to an interesting subject, because a lot of people said, oh, I thought she lived in Beverly Hills. She actually had 2 homes. She lived on Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills and also here in Augusta. Later on in her life, she spent a lot more time here because she was doing shows in Chicago and New York, and she really did not like to fly. So she drove a lot. And New York City is actually where I would see her quite often when she was doing a stint at the Regency on Park Avenue. And she always dedicated one of her greatest songs to me, but one of her lesser known songs called Sweet Kentucky Ham. Sweet Kentucky Ham is about a traveling salesman. And so if you listen to it or stream it, you'll see why she dedicated it to me as I traveled across the country as Miss America, because it's a pretty lonely job, certainly. But it's on one of her albums called The Girl Singer, so you might want to look that up. But her Roxbury Drive home, unfortunately, is no longer standing. So behind me, you'll actually see some of the pictures of her house. Now, what happens a lot in Hollywood is people come in, they buy these old stars homes or estates, and they tear the homes down to make way for more palatial mansions. What's really devastating about this trend is a lot of homes have magnificent history, not only for the current star that lived there, but this was also George Gershwin's home. So we find that at 1019 North Roxbury Drive, we have a lot of Hollywood history that happened here, and unfortunately it no longer exists. Now, one of the beneficial things my husband actually went out to California during the demolition and was able to salvage several pieces from the house. So one of my desires here at the Rosemary Clooney House would be to build back on an extension of the house so that we can actually recreate the portico here and the driveway. And why that would be important is because we also have in our collection her 1973 Stingray Corvette and her 56 white T-Bird convertible. And there's a great story behind those two, because Rosemary, when she separated from Jose, she had not seen Dante DePaulo for a while. And they actually had been dating before she met Jose Ferrer. In fact, Dante went off to film Seven Brides for Seven Brothers when Rosemary met Jose and fell in love with him, and they got married. So for many years, they hadn't seen each other. And the story goes, as Dante told me many years ago, that there was a stoplight in Beverly Hills. She drove up to the stoplight in her 73 blue Stingray Corvette, and he drove up in his 56 white T-Bird convertible, and he looked over, and there was Rosemary. And of course, he called her Rosella, and he yelled out her name, and he said that his dashboard was so dusty, and he actually wrote in the dust her new phone number, and that's how they reconnected. So we are very proud to be able to have both of those cars and that love story in our collection today.
Are the families involved at all?
The families are involved. In fact, Dante was involved with the museum up until the time he passed away. He and I both did several shows on some of the boats that come from Cincinnati. There is a B&B riverboat company, and we actually would go to Cincinnati and we would do luncheons for the guests on the boat. And every now and then he would do a little soft shoe dance routine as we made our way down the Ohio River, and we would disembark here in Augusta and take all of the tourists on a tour of the Rosemary Clooney Museum and bus rides around Augusta. You have to understand, Augusta is only 4 blocks long and 4 blocks wide, so it's very easy certainly to navigate. But Nick himself has done some wonderful videos and dedications for us. Nina, of course, is always available anytime that we need any sort of facts or information. She's just so hands-on, which is so great. And of course, George, as I said, has contributed a lot. And then Ada, George's sister, actually lives here in town as well. Rosemary's children, Miguel Ferrer, before he passed away, had been here at the house. And Monsita is probably one of the children that is the most active with us. In fact, she's the one that contacted us in order to purchase the house before it went on market. So she's come back quite a bit. And then Debbie Boone, Rosemary's daughter-in-law, is a close friend of the museum as well, which we find very beneficial.
A lot of names that people remember. Just out of curiosity, it's very sad when you think about these homes you're saying in Beverly Hills and Hollywood that have been demolished. They should have had a historic marker on them to avoid that. The George Gershwin home being torn down, very sad when you think about it.
Pretty devastating. In fact, we were told that Madonna tried to buy the home at auction and was outbid by over $1 million. That every time she bid, the new owner would just raise her $1 million. She really loved Rosemary. In fact, she did a tribute to Rosemary, and she really wanted to save the house, but wasn't able to do so. So I haven't reached out to Madonna to say, thank you for your desire and your passion for Rosemary, but maybe we should do that in the future.
So we have we've been doing quick surveys as you're speaking. Okay. And one of the questions is, what was your favorite Rosemary Clooney song? And we had several of them come on to my house. Mambo Italiano, Hey There, This Old House, and Sisters. Do you have a favorite?
Well, of course, my favorite is Sweet Kentucky Ham, which I mentioned she used to dedicate to me when I would see her in concert when I was on the road. It's a lesser known song of hers, but it's so beautiful. And I would just encourage anyone, if you're really looking for something to do with your time, to search online to download Sweet Kentucky Ham. Now, Come On to My House, an interesting story, and it's probably a known story about that song. Rosemary really didn't like that song very well. And in fact, she didn't want to sing or record the song. And Columbia Records said she had to do the song because she was one of their artists. And so she was made to do it, but it made her an instant star. I think that that's a pretty common theme in those days among some of those stars, where the studios came up with some of the work that the artist had to perform. But I'm certainly thankful that they did, because that became, of course, one of her most noted songs, as well as Mambo Italiano. One of her other favorite tunes was Tenderly. She was very known for that, even though that one has been recorded by many artists. But I think one of the most known artists was Rosemary Clooney performing the song Tenderly.
Yeah, you're correct on that. I've read many times about Perry Como had the same feelings about some of those novelty songs that he had. He just didn't like them. He just wanted to sing.
Right, they were a little campy, right?
Yeah.
And Rosemary was loved to think of herself as a true jazz artist. That was her love, certainly in the big band. She was a great singer who had a big band sensitivity, is what she said, or sensibility, and she really loved that. And so, Come On My House was a little campy, I think, for her, but we're certainly glad she did it. Now, behind me, as we continue the tour, is a collection from Here Come the Girls. Now, Here Come the Girls, she actually created with Arlene Dahl, Tony Martin, and Bob Hope. In fact, Bob Hope Productions actually filmed this. The funny thing about this movie is Bob Hope's wife is noted as saying she thought it was the worst movie Bob Hope ever did. Now, funny thing though is my girls have grown up watching this movie because they were very young when we opened the museum, but it's a great musical. The costumes are divine. Arlene Dahl, every time she's on screen, is just exquisite. And there are a few costumes that we know exist of hers. And one of those that Harper just showed you is the black gown. Now, what's interesting about all of the costumes that you will see throughout the museum is that there are 3 auction houses that we normally rotate in viewing their collections, because they're most known for auctioning off movie memorabilia. You have Profiles in History, which has a show on television called Hollywood Treasures. There is Julian's Auctions and Bonham's Auctions. From time to time, there are some other auction houses like Christie's that will do a few pieces, but those 3 I just mentioned actually do the big things like Gone with the Wind, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Wizard of Oz. They do the big stuff. And so we find that when we get their catalogs, we really have to scour through every page just in case there might be something from Rosemary's movies or career. And that's what happened with this Arlene Dahl piece, actually. It was listed as an unidentified Paramount production piece, and it was actually auctioning off with 2 other black pieces. By the time, of course, the auction came around, they too knew it was Arlene Dahl's from Here Come the Girls. And instantly when I saw it, I knew it was Arlene Dahl's from Here Come the Girls, because I had been watching the movie for years, certainly, and it's actually on the cover of several of the lobby cards. She actually dances and does a scene with Bob Hope as he's in the gold tux, which is in the background. The interesting thing about this dress, we do know that there were 2. We know that there is a collector in California that has another version of this dress. We don't know why, but a lot of times there are multiples made, certainly. But this, of course, has the Paramount tag and has her name in the tag, as does most of the costumes in the museum and in Hollywood history. The studios would have their own hand-sewn-in tag with handwritten names on those. The funny thing about this particular piece is we already had the gloves, but the gloves came to us from a totally separate journey. The gloves actually came as part of a Vera Ellen collection that we purchased at auction. Wow. And she was known as loving opera gloves. In fact, there's an entire website devoted to Vera Ellen's obsession with opera gloves. But we knew that these went with the movie. And so when we got the dress, for the first time in over 60 years, the gloves and the dress were actually back home together.
Thank you, Harper. Harper, can you get a closer look at that Bob Hope outfit? It's hidden in the back there, and I just wanted to...
It is. And also what's great about these Bob Hope pieces right here, we were actually able to work with Debbie Reynolds before she passed away, and we actually purchased the Bob Hope pieces in this collection directly from Debbie Reynolds. And as you may well remember, Debbie Reynolds had a pretty notable collection herself. Her desire was to have a Hollywood costume collection and museum in Las Vegas. Unfortunately, it never came to fruition, so she had to auction off. She did a 2-day auction of most of her items, but we were able to get several of these pieces from her personally, which is great. Over here, we've got 2 more pieces, another Bob Hope striped tux. What's great about this particular tux, Dante DePaulo, again, was in this movie with Rosemary, and he was the lead male dancer. He actually taught Bob Hope his dance steps throughout this movie, and Dante actually had a similar costume. Dante was alive when we dedicated this and was here during our dedication and was really thrilled to see this piece, and he told us lots of great stories. This piece in front is actually Rosemary's. It's a 3-piece wool and velvet piece that actually snapped together. And you can see just how tiny her waist was. Again, 23 inches, certainly. When they wear these costumes in the same scene, they are performing the famous song, You Got Class, which later went on to be recorded by several other famous duos as well.
That dress must have been extremely warm under the studio lights.
That's right. Warm and uncomfortable. It is not finished inside. I mean, when we were placing this on the mannequin, I even thought as a professional seamstress and designer, wow, this must have been really uncomfortable to sing and dance in.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty raw. So as we move through this room, we also see lots of wonderful photos and memorabilia. Bob Hope's wife gave us several photos of he and Rosemary together. Bob Hope and Bing Crosby were really instrumental in helping Rosemary throughout her career and actually helping her later on in life to rejuvenate her career. They were huge champions of her, and we can't forget, those friendships really are tried and true throughout Hollywood history. In fact, Bing Crosby, we have one of his original letters that he himself typed that actually got her the role in White Christmas. And it says in there, to sort of paraphrase, I know a gal who's got a fair voice who would be a great Betty Haynes. So it's funny how they all tend to help each other out from time to time.
She was quite popular, and she worked with just about every comedian. I have, as we go through the slideshow, I have pictures of her with Bob, with Jack Benny, with quite a few individuals.
Well, Rosemary herself was pretty funny and witty. She had a very dry sense of humor from time to time that would catch you off guard, no doubt.
I have a clip that's on my playlist in YouTube of Rosemary with Jack Benny and Bob Hope. I'm certain you've seen it. They're having a conversation. Jack and Bob are arguing, and Rosemary comes in. All she has to do is do a line, but Jack is ad-libbing so much. Every time she opens her mouth, he's got another punchline that he's throwing out, and she keeps going at it, trying to get her line out. But Jack keeps interrupting all the time. It's really a funny bit.
You know what? That does not surprise me. In fact, I was really, though, surprised to see that on YouTube, a lot of the Rosemary Clooney show, she later went on to have her own show called The Rosemary Clooney Show. And you can view a lot of those original shows on YouTube, which is really beneficial as well.
I'll tell you, when you're saying that she worked with all these great, I think the bottom line is she had a sense of humor. And
she had a great sense of humor.
Yeah. And Absolutely. They're not going to be drawn to somebody that doesn't fit into their little world of comedy.
Right, who understood them, certainly. And I think that Bing Crosby and Bob Hope both did that tremendously. So as we walk through the house and we're leaving the back part of the house, we're going back to the front part of the house. And you'll see as we walk through some wonderful photos, again, photos from family and career, Rosemary and Nick, Rosemary in the studio, and then, of course, Nina, Rosemary's sister-in-law. The funny thing about Nina actually held a preliminary title called Miss Lexington that got her to Miss Kentucky, and that's where she and Nick actually met. I actually happen to have held that title as well in order to get to Miss Kentucky. So we both share a little bit of that Miss America trivia history. So as we walk through the house, we come into what is arguably the most famous room in the house and the most desired. This is the White Christmas room. You'll see above us a recreated Columbia Inn sign. We don't have very many reproduction pieces, but from time to time when we rent or loan the exhibit out to other museums, they're actually able to reimagine the collection in a much larger space. And so they make displays and props for their exhibit. And so we were really delighted that one of the museums made the official Columbia Inn sign and actually donated it back to the museum. So that's a really special piece that we have as entrance to the room. So this room was actually Rosemary's living room. We've turned it into the famous White Christmas room. So what's great about this room is it houses some of the most beloved pieces of the holiday classic White Christmas, which I think is arguably the most famous Christmas movie of all time. There are many reasons why I love this movie. One of them is not only because it contains Rosemary, but it also is a military appreciation Christmas movie. As many people, if they go and look over my history, my Miss America year and beyond was spent honoring our military veterans because my dad's a Vietnam veteran. And so this movie to me is just one of those treasured classics that the entire plot is about honoring General Waverly, who's played by Dean Jaggers. Within this collection, one of the very first pieces that we got was this wonderful Sisters fan. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is the original. For those who have said that Sisters is their favorite song, this is one of the two Sisters fans. Now, what's important about this particular fan was this was the first piece that Paramount was able to find in their collection. And that's really the funny story, right? Like, how did we even start building this collection? Well, it all really started with the reproduction piece of the red dress back here in this case. It's the only reproduction costume that we've got in our entire collection. I actually was doing a show in Louisville, Kentucky, and the director wanted me in Rosemary's red, white Christmas dress. Well, of course, for my Miss America year, I had done a lot of television and made a lot of connections. And so I had met actually the president of Paramount in those days. So I called him and asked if he had anything from White Christmas available for me to actually see. I'd like to see, Edith had sketched or a picture of this particular dress, because at the time it was only available on VHS tape. So on VHS, you couldn't really see the construction of the dress. And my mom, who's a professional seamstress, and I were trying to design the patterns, and we wanted to know, was it a set-in sleeve, a raglan sleeve, a shawl collar, a shirt collar, where was the zipper? And we just could not see that on a VHS tape because the clarity was not great. So that was the first time I talked to a gentleman named Randall Thropp, who actually is from Columbus, Ohio. So Randall went to look in their archives and realized they really didn't know where much of their collection, not only from White Christmas, but from other movies. It just was not something in the studios at that time to collect their history and treasures from their movies, which of course they now do. And Randall helps to collect some of those things back to Paramount. So a month goes by, I get the dress made, I do the show, and then we purchase Rosemary's home. Well, then I called Randall back and I said, hey, Randall, we just purchased Rosemary's house. Did you ever find anything from White Christmas? And he said, interestingly enough, he went and started searching through closets and boxes, anything he could find. And that's where he actually found the two Sisters fans. And so the first piece they ever sent us or loaned us was the White Christmas fan. And still to that date, we thought, well, we'll probably have a few pieces. If they find anything else, we'll have the house open during festivals. Here in Augusta, we have festivals in a non-pandemic year, right? We have festivals like every weekend, certainly. So usually these big homes will open their houses so people can view. We had no idea still, even at that time, that we would have an entire museum or have enough to have a museum. But Paramount started finding a couple of other pieces, and then we actually found a few at auction. So I'd like to showcase for you, first and foremost, the two Sisters dresses. Now, these are the original dresses, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people say, are those the original? These are the original. Now, of course, you'll see on your right-hand side, that is Vera Ellen's. And Vera Ellen, of course, was noted as being really thin in this film. Her waist, 18 inches. The mannequins for Vera Ellen's outfits have to actually be specially made because there are no commercial mannequins with waists that are 18 inches. Even juvenile mannequins' waists are not 18 inches. This particular piece came to us from a collector in Texas. What's interesting about this particular dress, and we talked about that restoration process. So this piece had been changed or altered over time, and I'm going to show you a picture real quick of how it came to us. So we actually got the dress, and it had been cut off into a strapless sweetheart neckline, as Harper is showing you. It was pretty devastating to see that it had been changed or altered so drastically. Now, the skirt was in great condition, but the top, of course, less than perfect. So then we talk about the restoration process. So Betsy Potter, who is a wonderful costume designer in Hollywood, actually took this upon herself to recreate the sleeves and the chest area. She handmade the lace. She actually hand dyed it and faded it to match the original lace that you see on the bust. So only a super trained eye can even possibly see where the new lace starts and the old lace begins. She did a masterful job. Took her about 2 years of a restoration process to be able to restore that back to its original look.
That's magnificent. It's priceless.
It is priceless, and it costs enough to be called priceless as well, for sure. Over here, we have Rosemary's. Now, again, we talk about this incredible journey. Rosemary's was found on eBay under vintage 50s party dress. It was highlighted as being Rosemary's from White Christmas. The tag in it is a Paramount tag. Again, anytime we privately purchase something, we get it authenticated through Paramount because that means a lot to us. Rosemary's, unfortunately, had been in a store window. The top, although structurally intact and its integrity is beautiful, quite faded. You can certainly see Vera Ellen's actually fared much better in its color stay over years. Now, Rosemary, while the top is structurally intact, the skirt had been altered significantly. In fact, it was quite devastated. There were layers missing. There were sequins missing. It had been chopped off at the bottom. And so Betsy took this piece back as well and did some restoration work again on the bottom just to kind of revive it and bring it back to its former glory. But these two dresses are, I mean, people come in singing the sisters' song when they see these dresses. It is arguably the most famous song from the movie. Now, there are going to be those who say, I love sisters, but their favorite song might be the sultry Love You Didn't Do Right By Me that Rosemary sings during the Carousel Club scene. The Carousel Club scene, one of my favorite scenes, we actually have two pieces. And to me, on the right-hand side, these are Rosemary's rhinestone gloves that she wears during Love You Didn't Do Right By Me. What's great about these gloves, they are donned with hundreds of pave crystal rhinestones, and that meaning that they actually have the prongs and the backings on the rhinestones, making them quite weighted. Now, if Harper pans up, you'll see this great famous photo of George Shakirus, who later went on to win an Oscar for West Side Story. This was his first big deal being in a Hollywood movie. And this particular picture was highlighted in a magazine at the time. And he got floods and floods of fan mail. And this is really what started his career. We were very fortunate that a few years ago, George Shakirus came back when he was touring the country for the 50th anniversary of West Side Story. He came back to the museum because he actually is from the tri-state area. He is from a little town called Norwood, which actually is smack dab in the middle of Cincinnati. It's one of the few cities within a city in the United States. And incidentally, Vera Ellen is also from Norwood, Ohio. So within this film, you have a lot of stars who have we call it the tri-state area, who have a tri-state connection. And so when George came back, he shared with us several things about the film. And I told him that these gloves were my personal favorite in the collection. And he said, oh, that's too bad because Rosemary hated those gloves. He said that Rosemary got so frustrated because the rhinestones, as I said, had a metal backing on them. So the rhinestones kept snagging on not only the costumes from the other actors, but also would snag on themselves. And so when you watch this movie again this holiday season, or you stream it from, I think it's probably on Netflix, you'll see that she moves her hands a little robotically in this particular scene. And the reason why is because of the rhinestone prongs on these gloves. So just a little behind the scenes scoop. And you'll see in some of the pictures that Harper is showing you just kind of how spread apart her hands were and just how a little bit stiff her movements were in that scene. And
Heather,
just for your
Heather,
viewers,
do you think gloves would ever come back again for women?
you know, I love gloves, and I wish evening gloves would. And I'm part of a group called the Daughters of the American Revolution. And actually, during our state meetings, we actually have an evening event where it's required that you wear evening gloves, which is very nice. But as far as through style and normal style for everyday people, I'm just not sure, but I wish they would. It's the same way with hats. Now, here in Kentucky, we have the benefit that during the Kentucky Derby every year, or during a non-pandemic year, when we have the Kentucky Derby with fans, we go crazy over hats. But hats and gloves, that is two of my favorite styles from yesteryear that I wish would come back.
Same here. Same here.
Absolutely. Very elegant. The gloves are actually sitting on what was Rosemary's rehearsal piano. She had this in her bungalow at Paramount and had this in her personal home in Beverly Hills on Roxbury Drive. And Dante DiPaolo actually gave us this from his collection. And he said that Bing and Danny Kaye and Bob Hope, they used to sit around this piano and sing and play songs until the early hours of the morning.
Heather, do you mind if I just add one little story about sisters?
Sure, absolutely.
And you know it, I'm certain, that this movie was not meant for Danny Kaye. It originally was going to be a Fred Astaire reunion with Bing Crosby. It would have been the third movie together, but he opted not to do it. Donald O'Connor was approached. He opted not to do it for different reasons, and it ended up in Danny Kaye's lap. The script is still rather stoic in terms of it was really written for Fred Astaire. He didn't have too many opportunities to do Danny Kaye until they started playing around with the sisters number in between takes. And from the stories that you read about it, they were just having fun in between takes. Michael Curtiz, the director, said, let's just film it. And it turned out so much fun that they kept it in the movie. It was not meant to be in the film, and it's a highlight of the movie. And it shows that if they gave Danny a little more leeway, he could have added a lot more to that film.
Well, what's also funny about that scene, and you're exactly right, it was sort of a spur of the moment thing that they did. In fact, we actually think that the second Sisters fan, which actually is broken, they think actually broke during the filming of that scene because they actually hit each other so hard with that fan that the story goes that one of those broke because they hit each other so hard.
As a matter of fact, if you watch it again, as you said, if you stream it or watch it during the holidays, watch the very last frame. Bing Crosby is laughing over the soundtrack.
He is. Can you only imagine being on the set at that time when they were doing this? I just think what an incredible duo. All the stars really aligned when you talk about those actors and actresses that actually wound up together in this film. And White Christmas still being one of Danny Kaye's #1 films of all time as well.
Yeah. There's stories about Vera Ellen dancing with Danny Kaye, and he accidentally trips her during the actual moment. It's on the film. You could actually freeze it and see at that moment. Do you want to discuss that?
Well, we know that there are actually two moments where, Vera Ellen was known as being a technique perfect dancer. In fact, she's probably one of the more unappreciated dancers of her day. I mean, her technique was just spot on. And George Shakirus talked about that when he was here at the museum. He talked about her, and he also talked about John Brascia, that Brascia was like the god of, the male dancers in Hollywood. And he mentioned that there were a couple of moments in the film where one, Danny Kaye accidentally trips Vera Ellen, and the other during the Mandy scene where she's supposed to sort of end a movement on a toe point, and she actually slips accidentally. And you see that, now that I know it, I can't not see it every time I see it. But it's one of the few mistakes that are actually made throughout the film. So I think we'll let Danny and Vera have a little bit of, we'll give them one or two on that because they were so good.
She is one of the best and most underrated stars of that time period.
You're exactly right. And so that brings me actually to one of her outfits. I'm going to pan over here to the other side of the room. We actually have these wonderful display cases that were made for us for the collections. The important thing for us being right on the river is that we have to be able to extract all of these costumes out of the house in case there is a flood. We've talked about those floods once every 30 years. So the cases are actually built to actually come apart as well. And that's really important because right after we purchased the home, we actually almost had a flood. It got up to Riverside Drive. So we really had the forethought to think, gosh, when we house these costumes, we really need to build cases that break down. Over in this case is one of our most expensive costumes, and it is a Vera Ellen costume. And this is a great illustration of what Edith had to go through in order to build more mass into Vera Ellen. Shakirus told us that she got so frustrated because Vera was smaller in this film than in any of her films throughout her entire career. If you look at any of other Vera Ellen's films, she looks like a very normal, healthy dancer. And in this particular film, she is so thin, again, 18-inch waist, that when Edith Head was fitting her, a lot of her costumes kept showing her, like collarbones were protruding. This particular costume around the leg and groin area kept gapping open. So Shakirus said in one of the fittings that Edith, the director, came in and told Edith to add more material on this particular costume so that she looked like she had some mass around her hips. And also added the neck piece on. So a lot of people say, oh, she had an eating disorder during this filming, but there is no medical evidence that we've been able to find. In fact, we actually have a White Christmas coffee table book coming out next year, which we're really excited about. So we've been able to get into the archives through the Bing Crosby estate, the Irving Berlin estate, and Paramount, and we have still yet to find any documents that would suggest she had an official eating disorder. We just know she was as thin as she ever was in this movie. And even Shakirus said he doesn't know why. And they supposedly were pretty decent friends. But again, a great illustration of what Edith had to do to kind of build her up. This particular costume, a funny story, we actually purchased from Profiles in History. It was our first auction experience. And the funny story, since you showed Lee Merriweather's picture at the beginning, Lee Merriweather and her daughter, one of her daughters, Leslie, who stunts for Sigourney Weaver, actually live out in California, as does their other daughter, Kyle. And so I called Leslie, Lee's daughter, and I said, can you be at this auction for us? We're going to bid by phone, but I'm really nervous about our phone call falling or, becoming, getting cut or dropping the line. And so we registered Leslie to be there. So when the auction started, someone was bidding against us on this outfit. And so I text Leslie and I said, Leslie, who in the world is bidding against us? And she said, oh my gosh, it's the guy who played Eddie Munster in the Munsters. He's bidding against you. And I went, what does he want this costume? So it was just kind of funny that he would be there to bid against us, but we actually wound up winning the bid. But that did mean that this became one of our highest ticket items, aside from the cars, the house, and the horse-drawn sleigh, which we now have from White Christmas. This one came to us in great condition, only had a little bit of restoration to undergo. We flew this back out to Paramount, and actually it had its own seat on the airplane going out to LA. So, very special costume. Now, its partnering costume, if you remember, you had all of these chorus girls during the Mandy scene, and there are dozens of chorus girls behind them. And there were two chorus girls, Pat McAllister and Betty Yudi, who were dancers. Now, the thing about Betty Yudi is interesting because she was good friends with a little-known actress, dancer named Barry Chase. Barry Chase came on set to Paramount to have lunch with Betty Yudi, and the director saw Barry Chase, asked her to read for the part of the ditzy blonde. If you all remember, well, kiss my foot and have an apple. If you remember that ditzy blonde that Danny Kaye tries to pair up to Bing Crosby, that is actress and dancer Barry Chase. And Barry got that part because she went on set to have lunch with Betty Yudi. So we were really excited when we got a hold of Betty Yudi, and she was able to share with us some stories. And we actually had lunch with Barry Chase in Venice Beach, California, and she shared with us some more wonderful stories, which will actually be in the book next year in that White Christmas collection.
Many of our viewers will remember Barry from It's a Mad, 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 Mad World.
That's right. And she actually became a dance partner with Fred Astaire as well for the Fred Astaire show.
Right.
So this costume came to us from Scotland. So again, we talk about the journey of these costumes. Some come from eBay, Texas, Profiles in History, Scotland. And so we're never surprised when we get a phone call or email from collectors. They come from all four corners of the earth. In fact, behind them, we've got two pieces from what we call the cast party scene. This is where Danny Kaye and Vera Ellen announced their fake engagement to try to get Bing and Rosemary together because they're upset with each other, or Rosemary's upset with Bing. So the green velvet piece came to us from a collector in Oregon. And what's interesting about that piece is it actually had, when we got it, it had lace that was covering those crisscross pieces. It had been used in another movie after White Christmas, although it's not documented what movie it was used in. But when we got it, of course, the crisscross pieces were there. We had the lace removed. It has the Rosemary Clooney Paramount tag in it. This piece was also highlighted in Vogue magazine as Style of the Day, and it is a beautifully preserved hunter green velvet. Right next to it is Vera Ellen's ivory wool dress. This is loaned to us from Paramount. As you can see, again, high neck, beading on the chest, has this wonderfully just fluffy sort of sash, a folded sash that comes around the waist and hips. And again, to give Vera a bit more substance as she is actually dancing with Danny Kaye throughout this scene.
Heather, I know this is an ongoing project for you, but how many years have you put into gathering the White Christmas exhibit?
So we opened the house, sort of soft opening in 2004. So, and we're still collecting today. So, about, close to 15 years, we have been searching the four corners of the planet to find more items. And sometimes items sort of come to us, and a lot of times we have to go search for the items.
Absolutely.
Heather,
yeah, it's a lot of fun because you learn so much about the process. I'm going to have Harper pan right down here. Two of our newer pieces for the collection are these two chairs. Now, Robert Altman, who was the choreographer, actually walked off the set at the end of the movie, at the end of the filming, and took the four chairs with him. And so these are the chairs that Vera, Danny, and Bing and Rosemary sit in the Columbia Inn. So we have all four of those chairs and two which we have at the museum. We got those from the state.
Heather, I know we have a lot of questions for you from our guests. Can we throw a few at you?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Take it away, Darren.
Thanks. So all these gowns and costumes, they are just beautiful to look at. And there's a question that came in from one of our guests. They were interested, all of the mannequins for the dresses, do they have to be custom made for the dress?
Most of the mannequins that are on the female costumes are custom made for those costumes. And in fact, when we move those into new museums who are renting or we're loaning the collection to, we no longer take the costumes off the mannequins. They actually move upright as one unit. Oh, so it's affixed to the mannequin itself. Yes, because it decreases the wear and tear on taking those on and off. Okay. All right. Thank you. And
Oh,
so
go ahead.
behind us, real quick before we go further, I just want to highlight 3 other pieces that are within our collection. We have Rosemary's car coat that she actually is on a train going to the Carousel Club. George Shakirus's black pant outfit that he wears in the Love You Didn't Do Right By Me scene, and that is actually came to us from Western Costume Company. And then a recent acquisition, which you are all the first to see because we've not unveiled it here at the house. This is John Brasha's dance costume from the Mandy scene. So the first time it will be premiered will be in South Carolina, but we put it up today just for you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Do you have any more questions before we go upstairs real quick?
We do. Michelle's just curious. You mentioned that you have to search down the costumes and pieces themselves. How do you begin a search? Where's the first step?
Google.
I worry you may get competition.
So we have lots of great volunteers that also help us scour the internet, collection books, old auctions. And we really just, it's sort of a shotgun blast. I don't want to mean that to sound uneducated or less academic, but a lot of times where these costumes wind up are not in academic archives. They're in hands of collectors who may have purchased them through an estate auction, or they were with something else that they purchased. Case in point, Arlene Dahl's gloves came with Vera Ellen's collection, which was a part of another collection that we purchased. And so you find that you have to be really creative in resourcing and in doing your searches. And so it's a great testament to just scouring the planet when you come to researching, that you leave no stone unturned. And there's been twice that we've actually missed an auction by one day. We know that there's a pair of pajamas that were Rosemary's from White Christmas that we missed by one day because we just, maybe that day we laid off searching, or we just didn't put the right search term in for a particular auction to pop up. And so those are the moments that kind of, you go, ouch, they kind of stick you in the side. So we try as much to do constant searching for these items.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And before we leave the White Christmas room, I want to come over here. We've got 3 pieces in this collection. Mary Wicks, who is the busybody housekeeper who causes most of the drama. This is her wool blue suit with the pearls, and that is loaned to us from Paramount, as well as the red robe that Rosemary wears when she kisses Bing Crosby as he sings Count Your Blessings. And then in the background, we have General Waverly's military uniform, General Waverly, of course, being played by Dean Jaggers. And we do have in our collection Bing Crosby's military uniform as well, and that's undergoing some restoration for the upcoming exhibit that we have in Greenville, South Carolina. So before we head upstairs to get to our last 2 rooms, are there any more questions?
Oh, nope, not right now. We're good. But that gives anybody else on Facebook or on Zoom, type in any questions that you have while we still have a chance.
Okay, so we're going to leave the White Christmas room and we're headed actually to go upstairs, and you're going to see the steps that Rosemary just absolutely loved. This is the original banister and steps that were in the house from 1830, and Rosemary has a very famous picture standing on these steps looking at the Ohio River that was actually on the front page of our local paper, and it's then since been recreated in many other newspapers as well throughout her career. So one of the restoration things that we had to do was new wallpaper in the house, and we utilized some services from Maysville, Kentucky, in order to get this done in a similar pattern that Rosemary had it. Now here you're going to see the view that Rosemary just loved. This is the view from outside the 2nd floor of the Rosemary Clooney Museum. See that Ohio River, isn't it beautiful? She used to sit here on the landing in this red leather chair and look out onto the Ohio River. This was really a place of respite for her. And it really was one of the reasons that we bought the house too, thinking that this was going to be sort of a vacation home for us. Of course, now it's 100% museum. Over here to the right, we have some of Dante DePaulo's items. Dante was a notable dancer in Hollywood. in Hollywood throughout his career. And here we've got some of his more personal items. He was known for wearing these bodacious Hawaiian shirts and some of his dance shoes as well.
And his taps.
His taps right there.
Yeah.
The white dress you see here is kind of a funny item. Whenever they highlight Hollywood celebrities from prom, they always highlight George Clooney and Laura Bach, their prom picture. And so Laura gave us her prom dress, which is featured in that photo. So it kind of stays up here on the second floor.
When you're bidding on these items, what kind of price range are you talking about?
So some of the items can go as low as maybe $2,500, but we've gone up to $40,000 on some of the costumes. Now, of course, the cars are much more, and the sleigh, but I think $40,000 is our most expensive costume.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is an investment. That's why we call this house a labor of love, because we certainly provide a lot of subsidy to the museum and the collections, but it's one that we are proud to do because she's a Kentucky gal. So here is Rosemary's bedroom. The only restoration to this bedroom was new wallpaper, but she loves floral wallpaper. So this particular bedroom has all of her original furniture in it, her bed, her dresser, even some of Jose Ferrer's shoes right over here on the nightstand. Jose being her first husband who won an Oscar for Moulin Rouge. She had 5 children in 5 years with Jose, certainly. And then over here, some paintings, and a photo that was restored. What plays in the background here in this room actually is a concert that she did when my husband was lieutenant governor. During their administration, they used to host concerts at the old governor's mansion. And so what you see playing behind me is one of her personal appearances and personal concerts for Governor Patton and the lieutenant governor, who is now my husband, Steve Henry.
Heather, did you imagine when they crowned you that day, had you any idea that the world was going to open up in this direction for you?
No, not at all. I don't think I could have ever anticipated the opportunities that have come my way. And what's really great is Rosemary, during her phone call to me, actually said, never forget where you came from. And Rosemary was so great at never forgetting Kentucky. In fact, when we were on the Rockefeller tree lighting ceremony together that year, which I'm very proud to say that we were on the same show to do that, she sang White Christmas. And when she tossed it back up to me, I was standing beside, I think, Al Roker and Matt Lauer. She said, Heather, tell the folks back home in Kentucky, I said, Merry Christmas. So she always mentioned Augusta and Maysville and Kentucky. And that just really impressed upon me that that's something that I should do, certainly after my Miss America year. And so no matter where I go and what I do, I will always say I'm a Kentucky gal, just like Rosemary Clooney.
Really nice. Beautiful stories.
So as we go back into the hallway, I'm going to kind of let Harper walk backwards if she is okay. You got, hold on one second. Let me do this for you. We're going to turn around. Let's just do a little change of juxtaposition. And we're going to kind of close out going into what we call the Miss America room. I know you're not here to see Miss America paraphernalia, but I did tell you I had a surprise for you. A couple of things. A lot of people asked me about photos of Rosemary and I together, and we actually got a chance to do a concert together with Rosemary, myself, and Debbie Boone, and that will always be one of the highlights of my professional career, is doing one of those shows with she and Debbie. And then this room actually contains a lot of memorabilia for me, different awards and things I got traveling the country and beyond. Your life is really never the same. And Rosemary knew that. And that's why she called me when I became Miss America. She knew that my life was going to change forever. And she gave me a lot of great tips and tricks. But one of the things that I want to show you, I was the Millennium Miss America. And so I had the great opportunity of having a very special crown that no other Miss America has. So I was crowned with the Millennium Crown because I was Miss America 2000. This one does not stay in the museum. This one stays with me, certainly. It's 24 karat gold with Swarovski crystal and rubies in it. But I wanted to bring it to you all today just to sort of highlight sort of that partnership that I had with Rosemary, and that, again, you bring the crown back home. She brought her career back home, and she never forgot that she was a Kentucky gal.
Heather, I should mention to everybody, I do have a screen up there, Darren, if you want to show it. We're going to be doing a special program. You invited us to have the Miss America celebration, and you have an entire brand new exhibit that you're putting together for that.
We do. In fact, I've leaned upon some of my Miss America sisters to loan us several of their items from their archives. I've got Miss America 1948 BB Shop. I've got her coronation gown, Lee Merriweather, her 50th anniversary gown, her Miss America trophy, which is like 2.5 to 3 feet tall. I've got her original Miss America sash, her Star Trek outfit. I've got Evelyn A., who actually crowned Lee Merriweather. I've got her evening gown and her coronation gown, Dorothy Benham, 1971. So we've got lots of great Miss America paraphernalia as part of our 100th anniversary exhibit, which we actually will put in the White Christmas Room when that one travels to South Carolina.
And if you want to see that, if you want to be part of it, just go onto the website, click on it, and January 18th, 10 a.m., we're going to be back with Heather, and we're going to be talking about Miss America and its wonderful 100th anniversary.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank you all for being a part of this wonderful exhibit. If you have any questions or comments, if there are things that pop up for you after this show, please feel free to message us on Facebook at the Rosemary Clooney House, or direct message us on Instagram at Rosemary Clooney House Official. That's our official Instagram page. We'd be more than happy to get back with you on information and artifacts.
Heather, I can't imagine what the last 20 years have been like for you, but it's been an incredible journey. You've got a book in you.
Oh, well, a lot of people do say and have pleaded with me that I should write a book, but you know what? Maybe one day. I've got a whole lot to deal with before then.
Thank you so much, Heather. I can't say, I know our people are really thrilled to be meeting you, and we'll see you in January 18th.
Oh, Sal, thank you so much. What a joy to be with you today. And to everyone out there, stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. Have a great day. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather. And thank you, Harper. You did a wonderful job handling the camera for us today. Let's go over a few things that Sal and Heather had pointed out. We do have links to a couple of the books that Sal mentioned. Girl Singer, of course, you can click on there, an autobiography. Also, we have, if you want to learn more, This for Remembrance, and it's an autobiography by Rosemary Clooney herself. Please do go to the Rosemary Clooney website, rosemaryclooney.org. There you can see a lot of the things that we were just looking at today. You can learn more, plenty of things to interact with, as well as going to their Facebook page and their gift shop.
I should mention, Heather is very modest. She designs quite a bit of these items that are on their website, so you should check them out. They're original items that Heather herself has designed.
Well, that is certainly worth noting. So, I mean, you can see all of the artwork that goes into these. These are really beautiful pieces, all of them. And especially with the holidays coming up, this is definitely a great click to check out for gifts.
You're a sister mug.
Yes, a sister mug. There we go. As Heather mentioned, they are on Facebook. If you feel comfortable on Facebook, join them over there. You can shop now. You can like and follow them and message. Also, you can follow Sal St. George on Facebook. All of his lectures are there, and we're even streaming there live today. You can see lots of Sal's lectures and his favorite videos on his YouTube channel, Sal St. George, on there. You can see clips of Rosemary Clooney as well. And as always, you can sign up for all of our lectures at salstgeorge.com. Here you can see today's lecture. And then coming up, we have a road trip to It's a Wonderful Life Museum, the 100th anniversary for Miss America. As we mentioned, you can sign up right here. Laurel and Hardy, Clark Gable, and Phil Silvers, taking us even into 2021 and over to England for Phil Silvers. Next week, we have the making of Singing in the Rain, which is going to be wonderful. And we have our special guest, Daniel, is going to be back with us, which is always great. So lots coming up later in the month for November. At the end, we close out November with the making of White Christmas. So if you were here today, you're going to want to check that out. And you can see all of our previous virtual road trips on our homepage right here. You can visit the website and you can also watch the recorded video. So thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Harper. Thank you, Sal. And we look forward to seeing everybody again soon.